Czemu po 2 tygodniach zachwytów i debaty publicznej nad tym, że nasz zachodni sąsiad, Niemcy, nasz partner, nasz sojusznik, nie korzystają z programu SAFE, bo mają niższe oprocentowanie kredytowe na swoje zbrojenia?
Cześć, witam, dzień dobry, what's up? This is Mike. Today we're going to talk about this situation happening in Polish Parliament, this tug of war between the Civic Coalition Party, better known as KO, between Donald Tusk, and the Law and Justice Party, better known as Peace, between President Karol Nawrocki. Okay, so here's what we have here. What SAFE is and why Poland was its biggest winner. The Security Action for Europe SAFE program is EU's most ambitious defense financing instrument to date. $150 billion pool, 50 billion euros of low-interest loans designed to accelerate military procurement and reinforce Europe's defense industrial base in the face of an aggressive Russia. Introduced in 2025 and enforced since May of that year, it allows member states to co-finance weapon systems, air and missile defense, anti-drone technology, and related capabilities at highly favorable rates. Joint procurement between two or more countries is the general rule, though individual national contracts are also eligible under transitional. Poland stood to receive nearly 44 billion euros, roughly a third of the entire fund, and by far the largest national allocation. For Warsaw, with its 4.7% GDP defense budget and its status as the most exposed frontline NATO ally, this was not simply a financial windfall. It was a structural opportunity to lock in long-term European financing for the transformation of the Polish armed forces while simultaneously channeling more than 80% of those contracts to domestic defense companies. Tusk's government estimated the program would benefit about 12,000 Polish firms. This is crazy for me as an American because when I moved to Poland, there was still Gazprom. And so for me, Poland was doing business with Russia. Pretty much everywhere I looked in the European Union, people were doing trade with Russia. And then suddenly, I don't know, at the behest of the United States, and I'm not in favor of what Putin did. I don't know enough about the situation right here next door in Ukraine. You don't get much information on mainstream media, so it's really hard to really ascertain any information, what you think might be what's accurate versus what's misinformation. But it's kind of strange for me because Putin has suddenly become the boogeyman. I know Russia and Poland, the Lithuanian Commonwealth in general, I know the borders have shifted over centuries, but to see Putin, who really hasn't done anything that I can see since I've been here 8 years, other than do business, it's crazy to see that Poland and other EU member states have decided to make Russia the boogeyman. I am not for Russia. I know Russia is an empire, just like the United States. They have their own agenda. They're trying to secure their own influence in the sphere of the world. So I don't necessarily, I gotta say that carefully. So I don't necessarily agree or disagree with what Russia is doing. I just understand Russia is an empire. But it seemed to be very clear and obvious. Russia was at one point in time the European Union's biggest trading partner when it related to at least oil. The parliamentary passage of the implementing law in late February 2026 was a moment that should have been greeted with near consensus. In most NATO Eastern flank countries, it was, not in Poland. The Law and Justice Party, Peace, and its aligned president immediately cast SAFE as a Brussels leash, an alleged vehicle for German interference in Polish defense procurement and a mechanism that would bind Warsaw to European supply chains at the expense of its most critical ally, the United States, and a debt sentence passed on future generations. My perspective as an American, Poland right now is spending the most in the European Union, although its GDP is not the same as a France, as a Spain, as Germany, which is probably the biggest GDP in Europe. When I look at the American military contractors, and I'm going to be a little biased, if we look at companies like Raytheon, Boeing, General Dynamics, these companies perform really well in the stock market. And I can tell you that money does not necessarily trickle down into society. People that are investors, they can become wealthier. I am not against the stock market. I am not against free market capitalism. But when it relates to Poland, if Poland's going to be on the hook for the foreseeable future, spending almost 5% of GDP, and is forecasted to increase, you have $45 billion in EU loans. You're going to have to pay that back at some point. There's interest in that. How long is that going to take to repay that loan? And then you have a loan currently with the Korean government because you also receive loans. Poland, I believe, is being exploited because of their position and the proximity to Ukraine and Russia. But I don't know if those threats really exist. Is Russia really the biggest enemy of Poland right now and the European Union? George Bush was in office. George Bush embraced Putin with open arms.
We had a very good dialogue. I was able to get a sense of his soul. He's a man deeply committed to his country and the best interests of his country. And I appreciated so very much the frank dialogue. There was no kind of diplomatic chit-chat trying to throw each other off balance. There was a straightforward dialogue. And that's the beginning of a very constructive relationship. I wouldn't have invited him to my ranch if I didn't trust him.
I don't see Putin as a changed man, and I have to be careful with saying this because it would sound like a Russian talking point. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it from an outsider looking in. Is Putin really the biggest threat to the European Union? Or is this fear-mongering being able to gin up defense military spending and line the pockets of some private military contractors? So here we have Plan B. So now we have Donald Tusk's Plan B to sidestep the presidential veto of the EU's defense loans bill. Poland's government has launched this Plan B to obtain $44 billion. So it tells me the president of Poland has no power, and it seems like the prime minister might be the one with the most power here. So the president vetoes the bill, and we're going to do a Plan B to sidestep it. So again, Poland's government has launched a Plan B to obtain almost $45 billion in loans for defense spending from European Union's SAFE program after Karol Nawrocki, who is aligned with the right-wing opposition, yesterday vetoed a law intended to facilitate the funds. While the government insists the money will still arrive, it has warned that without measures blocked by Nawrocki, it may not be able to spend all the funds. The president's chief of staff, meanwhile, has criticized the government for trying to circumvent the law. So they're trying to go around. Kombi Novak, just gonna go around, gonna figure it out. Nawrocki announced his veto on Thursday evening, claiming that the SAFE program would indebt Poles for decades on uncertain terms, and the national sovereignty would be undermined by giving Brussels influence over Polish defense spending. We've seen Greece be bailed out because they spent more than they were bringing in. We don't know what the climate will be here in 10 years in Poland, what the economy will look like in 10 years. It just seems like a lot of debt to saddle a country with when you already have guarantees from a Korean bank. And then you're also spending 4.5, almost 5% of GDP with the United States. So how much more debt do you want to put your country in when you can't really forecast what your economy would look like? The Polish economy looks like it's propped up basically by westernized companies. So if these Western European countries go in debt or they have a financial crisis and they pull out of Poland, then what happens with the society? So we have to forecast, I think, 5-10 years down the road. I personally don't think another $45 billion in loan expenditures is a good idea. The reference to lobbyists stems from accusations by the ruling coalition that Nawrocki, who is a close ally of Donald Trump, opposes SAFE because most of the funds need to be spent in Europe, which threatens the interest of U.S. defense firms. That's a good point. I would say that is a good point. But for me, if it's about the safety of Poland and the European Union, it shouldn't matter where the funds are spent. If it's about security, it shouldn't matter if you're spending the funds with Korea, the United States, or the European Union, if safety is at the forefront of what this whole argument is about. Tusk added that although the veto is a serious impediment, the government was prepared for this eventuality and would today adopt a resolution confirming the receipt of the SAFE funds even without the veto law. So it doesn't really matter, and we will see. So this is going to be a hot button topic moving forward. So here's another article that we have. This is on the same topic. Poland to be NATO's biggest defense spender this year as proportion of GDP. This is going back to 2024. Poland will spend the equivalent of 4.12% of its GDP on defense this year, which is the highest level among NATO members and more than double the alliance's guideline of 2%. So they're spending double of what all their counterparts are doing in the European Union. The figure, part of the estimates published by NATO this week for all its members, marks a rise from 3.92 of GDP Poland spent on defense last year, when it is also the alliance's highest relative spender. And they don't even have the same level of GDP or economy as these other countries. It is also more than double the country's figure from a decade ago. Behind Poland, the next highest relative spenders in the alliance this year will be Estonia, 3.43, very small country, close to the Russian border, or damn near on the Russian border. The United States, 3.38, Latvia, 3.15, and Greece, 3.08. And I won't get into all these. Poland has rapidly expanded its defense spending since Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Last year, the former Law and Justice Peace government pledged to increase spending to 4%. So they've already accomplished that. And that aim has been maintained by the new ruling coalition that took power in December. This is another interesting article I found, because in the city I live in Poland, I see a lot of American troops, and sometimes, no offense, I don't know what these guys are doing. Like they're just here. I just see these guys walking around the street, or they're on e-scooters. They're in pubs playing pool. I don't know what these guys do here, actually. I shouldn't say that, though. Defense, 24. Poland's cost for U.S. military presence surged past $500 million. Poland's spending on upkeep of U.S. forces stationed in the country is rising sharply. According to a report by Defense 24, journalists noted that Warsaw has been steadily increasing its expenses on infrastructure and support for American troops. They wrote last year that costs exceeded $250 million, and in the coming year, the figure could double. Data cited by Defense 24 show that almost $275 million was spent in 2023 on infrastructure for U.S. forces based in Poland. By 2026, more than $290 million will be required just for the construction of barracks and a dining facility in Powitz, home to an American missile defense base. I've been to Powitz, very nice place, nothing but Americans there, doing absolutely nothing. They have a beautiful lake. They have nothing but American food trucks. This is ridiculous. So as an American, I'm saying to Polish people, this is ridiculous. You're building infrastructure to make Americans comfortable. $250 million. What additional investments are also planned for facilities hosting U.S. contingents in Wrocław, Drawsko, Pomorowski, and Łask. The outlet estimated that the overall bill would amount to $500 million, or more than 1.8 billion zloty. So do you see what we're talking about here? 45 billion in a new European Union loan, 5% of GDP spending annually for defense, for weapons, and now you're spending $290, almost $300 million a year just to entertain American troops that aren't doing anything at this point. What are they doing? And mind you, NATO is not an offensive entity, it's a defensive entity. NATO only serves its purpose when it's attacked first. So Americans are basically just doing this. $4.48 of GDP now. We just saw an article a second ago. They were at 4.12 2 years ago. So they're approaching 4.5. Probably the next year or two, they'll be at 5%. If you look at all these other countries, Lithuania, 4%, Latvia, Estonia, these countries are spending a lot of money. These are very, very, very small countries. Their economies are not the same as the United States nor Poland. So this is where it gets interesting for me, because I would like to look at this video from Grzegorz Braun and see what you think about him.
Sign of our mutual understanding. We want Poland to be Polish, not to become some kind of Soviet or Euro-Soviet republic, not the next American state. Not Polish, Ukrainian Commonwealth. which is some people's idea, crazy because totally unrealistic and based on false history. We want Poland to remain Poland, and we want our country to be a country of free and secure people. Security is the key word, because what comes to us from the East and from the West questions not only our rights to remain Polish, to remain normal people, living peacefully, earning money, having families, having children, having rights to raise our children as our fathers, our grandfathers used to. When I say grandfathers, you might think that I am the kind of politician who would like to go back to some history that never was. No, I'm very I would like to think of myself as totally devoted to future, to bright future of my nation, and this cannot be achieved without peace. And this is the question, the problem number one, to preserve peace in Central Europe, in Europe.
So for me, this is a very based politician. For me, he's a very based politician. I don't see what's wrong with him in this context. Again, the shenanigans with the menorah in the European Parliament or the Polish Parliament, something totally different. But what he's talking about now, he doesn't want to be a vassal state to some Ukrainian Russian project. He doesn't want to be under the thumb of the United States. It's like you're losing your sovereignty as a country bit by bit. Okay, United States is taking a little bit of this because of that alliance. European Union is taking a little bit from this alliance. We owe the Korean bank some money from that loan. We have the Saudi Arabian bank. We have a lot of debt and increasing in Poland. And though I've seen the country develop tenfold, the first time I visited Poland was in 2012. I'm not saying the country has completely transformed, but the trains are much better. The infrastructure is much more developed than what it used to be. There's a beautification happening in the country, at least the cities I've been to. Warsaw, very modern city. A lot of cities are undergoing this beautification. There's huge investment here, and I'm not saying they should squander it away. I'm saying if you're spending that amount of money for the next foreseeable future, for the next 10, 15, 20 years, there's already a housing affordability crisis here. Many of my clients that I know who are very young in their family, in the stages of their marriages, they are not able to afford a flat. People in the legal industry, people in IT, they have rent. They rent their flats. So 10 years from now, we don't know what the country will look like.
Because we were used several times. We were used as a bumper by the empires, not only in the 20th but in the 90th and previous centuries. We were used as some kind of trigger to be used to start the revolution and World War. And this is the case of 1939, obviously, when we were pushed to the front, to the front line of that World War by the British, by Americans. Obviously, these were war criminals, comrades Hitler and Stalin, who divided Poland, who destroyed our state. But the inspiration was from London, and let's say authorization was from Washington. And we have documents. We have some other time you might want to hear more about historical facts. For now, I politically I stress I don't want any repetitions of this history. I don't want my nation to be used as a trigger of some revolution, some new world order revolution, which will not prevail without starting World War III.
I can see why they don't like this guy. I can really see why they don't like this guy. This guy is coming with facts. Facts do not work in the day and age we live in. We have politicians talking really pretty words, nice promises. And this is the interesting part for me, Polish people. I saw you guys en masse vote for Donald Tusk as a prime minister, and I saw you guys celebrate because everybody thought they were going to be able to get an abortion because this party was going to move the country forward. How did that work out? I have seen Donald Tusk do absolutely nothing, and now you have this gridlock between these two parties. Oddly, you've become a two-party country like the United States, so it's really crazy. Like, you don't have a middle ground anymore. So that's it for my commentary. Let me know, Polish people, what you think about my opinion when it relates to Grzegorz Braun. I'm not a huge fan of his antics when it related to the fire extinguisher and the Jewish menorah. But the rest of the stuff that I've seen in the video clip that we observed, I think it's pretty common sense. I don't think anything he's talking about. Again, I don't know the radical side of this man. I know in Poland, he's pretty much demonized. I know he's considered to be ultra-conservative, far-right. But in this video, I just didn't see that. So let me know again in the comment section below how you see my opinion, if I'm on base, off base, way off base. See you on the next one. This is Mike. Cześć.